Thank you. First of all, my real name is Peter Chu. Apparently they're not making Asians like they used to. Funny story, I was accidentally switched at the hospital with the Chinese kid in the next crib and sent home with his parents. I always did sense that there was something different about their tall, blonde son with a long, sharp nose, but it wasn't until they actually saw my SAT scores that they knew. What was it Dad said when they came in the mail? Ah, yes. No fucking way! Meanwhile, another family put two and two together when their straight-A son turned 16 and proceeded to flunk his driver's test 57 times. Oh, like you carpool with them. I do a lot of political material, partly because I grew up in Washington, D.C., but mostly because I'm lazy and the shit pretty much writes itself. Even before Trump. For example, you may recall right before the 2012 presidential election, former General David Petraeus stepped down as head of the CIA when it came out that he'd been having an affair with his biographer, the comely young Paula Broadwell. Does anybody remember the title of her biography? All In. You can't make that shit up. And now she's written the second volume, which she's calling Balls Deep. Okay, sometimes you can make it up. So, the Cold War's back. Woo! I can just hear Boris Badenoff now on the phone with his old partner. Natasha, get me the black dress out of storage. We are back. Kill moose and squirrel. Google Rocky and Bullwinkle, kids. You're in for a treat. But I'm glad it's back. I miss the Cold War. Because the Russians make such great villains. First of all, they all sound like Dracula. They will suck your blood. We will bury you. And the names. Vladimir, Boris, Igor, always know who the bad guys are. Only the Germans are more fun. Eins, zwei, drei, Sieg, Schulz. Google Hogan's Heroes, kids. You're in for a treat. But I think we'd be pushing our luck to take them on again. You know what they say, three's the charm. See, there were these two world wars we fought against. Not a big History Channel crowd. Yeah. But what's happening with Putin these days isn't quite like the Cold War I grew up with. For starters, the music was much better in the original, and the American president was on our side. Now, some say Trump doesn't have much to show for his time in office. I say fake news! I mean, think about it. It took this country over 200 years to produce a president as disastrous as George W. Bush. Trump left him in the dust on Inauguration Day. And for those with short memories, George W. Bush invaded the wrong country. Thank God, the only thing Trump's invaded so far is the locker room at the Miss Teen Universe pageant. Let's keep those fingers crossed on that, shall we? Speaking of which, am I the only non-Muslim in the room who prays to Mecca 5 times a day that somehow, someone, somewhere along the chain of command has switched the nuclear football that follows the president around with a real one? Because even Trump can only do so much damage with one of those, right? I doubt his tiny fingers could even grip the laces. Do you remember when the generals around Trump, and as you recall, the first year and a half or so, anyone in the room who wasn't a family member was a general. The generals knew he was nuts, so they came up with a plan to physically restrain the president if they saw him going for the nuclear coast. Swear to God, I'm not making this shit up. They called it Operation Tackle Dummy. Okay, that part I did make up. But truth to tell, our chances of getting into a nuclear war with Donald J. Trump in the White House are like 0 with Russia. Because we're all comrades now. The bad news is we clearly do have a Russian mole in the Oval Office. The Good news is their Manchurian candidate turned out to be a Manchurian idiot, so it's not working out too well for them either. Poor old Putin has to fly halfway around the world 3 or 4 times a year to meet with Trump face to face, just to make sure he understands his instructions. Remember a couple of years back, we all thought he was such a genius for pulling this thing off? Now Putin's the guy who picked a dumber sidekick than John McCain, and the only one who still thinks he's a genius is Oliver Stone. Oh man. Okay, this is how desperately I want to win this thing. Kim Kardashian has come out with a fragrance. So now for a mere $60 an ounce, you too can smell like an NBA locker room at halftime. Never one to miss out on a trend. Madonna's come out with one too. She's calling hers Truth or Dare because she hasn't had an original idea in 20 years, and Cum Dumpster was already taken.